Hey, 300 miles from home, my wife's family played a little joke on me and drove away, leaving me alone in the wilderness. They thought that was the end of it. They were very wrong. 300 miles from home, I stood before a rustic cabin with nothing but a backpack and the sound of car doors slamming shut behind me. That was where my wife's family believed their little joke would end. They were wrong. It began 6 months earlier when my wife mentioned the annual family retreat. Each year, her relatives gathered at this remote cabin for what they called a bonding time. I had managed to avoid it for 3 years straight, always citing convenient work conflicts or other obligations. This year was different. She insisted I come, explaining that her parents had specifically requested my presence. They really want to get to know you better, she said, her innocent eyes making refusal impossible. It would mean everything to me. So I agreed. A grave mistake. The drive up felt strange from the start. Normally, her family was loud and chaotic on road trips, but this time they kept exchanging glances in the rearview mirror. Her brother would whisper something to her sister, and then both would snicker quietly. Her parents maintained a peculiar, forced conversation about the weather and gas prices. I should have trusted my instincts when her father repeatedly asked whether Iva D brought enough clothes for an extended stay. When I inquired what he meant, he simply laughed it off. You never know what might happen up there. The cabin stood on 40 acres of practically nothing. No cell towers nearby, no neighbors for miles, just trees and a dirt road that vanished into the wilderness. The place had been in their family for decades, passed down from her grandfather, who apparently valued isolation more than human contact. We unloaded the cars, and I noticed they had packed significantly more supplies than usual. Multiple coolers, extra blankets, enough food for 2 weeks instead of the typical weekend trip. When I mentioned it, her mother merely smiled and said they wanted to be prepared for anything. That first evening felt off. During dinner, conversations would halt abruptly whenever she entered the room. Her father kept glancing at his watch as though awaiting something. Her brother could not meet my gaze without breaking into a grin. The entire family seemed to share some private jest from which I was excluded. After we retired for the night, I caught whispers from the adjoining room, muffled voices discussing the morning ahead and ensuring he suspects nothing. I persuaded myself I was being paranoid. These people had welcomed me into their family, had treated me kindly for years. Surely, I was misreading the situation. The following morning proved I had not been paranoid enough. I awoke to find a family already dressed and loading their vehicles. When I inquired what was happening, they exchanged those knowing looks once more. Her father stepped forward, wearing the same strained smile he had maintained all weekend. We've decided to depart early, he declared. Were calls. You understand how it is to something felt amiss. All right, let me gather my things to. That was when her brother began to laugh, not a polite chuckle, but a deep, unrestrained laughter, as if he had just heard the most hilarious joke of his life. Her sister joined in, then her mother. Soon, the entire family was laughing, all except my wife, who stared at the ground with what appeared to be guilt. What is so amusing? I asked. Her father cleared his throat, still grinning. The thing is, you're not coming with us. This is what we call a character-building exercise. Consider it a modern rite of passage. The words did not immediately register. What do you mean? We are leaving you here. Her mother explained cheerfully, as though announcing dessert. For a week, perhaps 2, depending on how long it takes you to figure things out. My wife finally looked up. It is merely a test. My family believes you have had things too easy that you need to prove yourself. They wish to see if you can handle true adversity. The casual cruelty of it struck me like a physical blow. They had orchestrated this elaborate scheme only to abandon me in the middle of nowhere, like some twisted trial. A survival show. All those whispered conversations, the extra supplies they had packed for themselves, the shared smiles. It had all been building toward this moment. Yuvo re-joking, I said, though their faces made it clear they were not. Her brother pulled out his phone and began recording. We want to document your reaction for posterity. Don T worry, there is enough food in the cabin for about 4 days. After that, you'll need to get creative to There's a stream about half a mile north for water. Her sister added helpfully. And we left you some basic tools in case you want to try hunting or fishing too. They honestly expected me to beg. I could see it in their eyes, the anticipation of watching me break down and plead for them to stay. They wanted me to prove their point, that I was soft, dependent, and incapable of handling real challenges. Instead, I walked to the porch and sat down on the steps. That was it? Her father asked, clearly disappointed by my lack of dramatic reaction. What did you expect? I replied calmly. Some fight, maybe some anger, her brother said, still recording. This is supposed to be a big moment for you. I looked at my wife, who could not meet my eyes. How long have you all been planning this? About 6 months. She admitted quietly. Ever since Dad said you seemed too comfortable, too used to having everything handed to you. 6 months of lies. 6 months of planning my humiliation as though it were family vacation. They had smiled at me across dinner tables, made small talk at birthday parties, all while secretly designing this elaborate punishment for the crime of existing in their daughter's life. I said, standing up and brushing off my jeans. I guess you'd better get going before it gets dark. The family exchanged confused looks. This was not the script they had written in their heads. You're not going to try to stop us? Her mother asked. Why would I do that? They loaded into their cars, still expecting some last-minute breakdown, some desperate plea for mercy, forgiveness, or rescue. My brother kept the camera rolling, waiting for the money shot of me running after their cars like an abandoned dog. I simply waved goodbye from the porch as their taillights disappeared down the dirt road, leaving nothing but dust and silence. I realized something that probably should have terrified me. Yet instead of panic or despair, I felt something far more dangerous: relief. The silence after their cars vanished was deafening. Not the uncomfortable quiet of an awkward conversation, but the profound stillness of being completely alone for the first time in years. No background chatter, no television noise, no constant buzz of notifications. Just me and 40 acres of wilderness. I walked back into the cabin and took inventory of what they had left behind. Enough for days of food, they had said, but that assumed I ate as I normally did. There were canned goods, some bread, basic staples, a manual can opener, a few utensils, matches, and a first aid kit. They had even left me a hunting knife, probably thinking I would cut myself trying to whittle a stick. The cabin itself was more substantial than I had given it credit for. Solid wood construction, a stone fireplace that actually worked, and a hand-pumped well in the kitchen that produced clean water. This place had been built by people who understood self-sufficiency back when that was a necessity, not a YouTube hobby. In a cabinet, I found a stack of old journals filled with entries from previous family visits dating back decades. Most were mundane accounts of fishing trips and family drama, but a few contained useful information about the area, locations of edible plants, the best fishing spots, notes on wildlife patterns. My phone showed no signal, as I had expected, but more importantly, its GPS function worked even without cellular service. I spent the afternoon mapping the area, marking the stream they had mentioned, and exploring the dirt roads that connected to the main highway. As evening fell, I kindled a fire and prepared a simple meal. Seated on the porch, I watched the sunset when my phone buzzed the cabin. It seemed was equipped with satellite internet. A message from my wife appeared. "How are you holding up? Hope you're not too mad about this." I stared at the words for a long while. Her casual tone felt as though she had merely forgotten to mention a change in dinner reservations, rather than having orchestrated my abandonment. I typed a single word in reply: "Fine." An hour later, another message arrived. "Dad wants to know if you need anything. There's a town about 15 miles south if you want to walk there." 15 miles. They had researched the area thoroughly enough to know precisely how far I would have to walk to reach civilization. This was no spontaneous prank. It was a calculated psychological experiment designed to systematically break me down. I did not respond. The next morning, I resolved to find that town myself, but not on foot like some desperate castaway. I spent an hour examining the property more carefully, and discovered something her family had either forgotten or never known. Hidden behind the cabin, beneath a tarp, was an old motorcycle, likely left by the grandfather decades ago. It took most of the day to get it running. The engine was solid, but the fuel system needed cleaning and the battery was dead. Fortunately, having spent considerable time working on engines in my younger years, I knew what I was doing. By late afternoon, I had transportation. The town turned out to be a small mountain community, existing primarily to serve hunters, fishermen, and the occasional tourist. It consisted of one main street with a general store, a diner, a small motel, and a gas station, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone else's business within hours. I walked into the diner and ordered coffee. The waitress, a woman in her 50s with graying hair and curious eyes, immediately pegged me as an outsider. "Be you staying up at the old cabin?" "Va," she asked. "Va, for now. Vadon Vati get many visitors this time of year. Most va." I waited until the hunting season crowd had thinned before approaching anyone. I explained my situation, carefully omitting the more humiliating details. I mentioned that I was staying at a cabin for a few weeks, needed some supplies, and wondered about work opportunities in the area. Her eyes lit up immediately. "Va, funny you should ask," Va, she said. "Va, we just lost our morning cook last week. The owner has been scrambling to cover the breakfast shifts for within an hour. I was speaking with the diner's owner, a gruff man who cared more about whether I could handle a grill than about my life story. He offered me morning shifts starting the next day with cash under the table, meals included. That evening, I rode the motorcycle back to the cabin with fresh supplies and a job secured. My phone showed 17 missed messages from my wife and her family. I scrolled through them without opening a single one, observing the progression from casual check-ins to growing concern. The last message, from her father, read, "This has gone on long enough. Call us back." I deleted all the messages and turned off the phone. The next morning, I began work at the diner. The early shift meant arriving by 5 a.m., but it also meant I was finished by noon, with the rest of the day to myself. The work was straightforward: eggs, bacon, pancakes, coffee refills. The regulars were mostly local workers, friendly enough once they realized I wasn't some city tourist playing a country life. By my third day, I had established a routine: work in the morning, explore the area in the afternoon, and spend quiet evenings by the fire, reading those old journals. The simplicity was addictive, and no office politics, no complex social dynamics, no elaborate family games designed to prove points about character. My wife called 4 times that day. I finally answered on the 4th call. "Va, thank God," Va, she said. "Va, we've been worried sick." "Why haven't Va you been answering?" "Va, I've been busy." "Va, you've supposed to be stuck in the middle of nowhere with nothing to do." "Va, I found things to do." A long pause followed. "Va, what kind of things?" "Va, does it matter?" "Va, of course it matters." This entire exercise was intended to teach you something about self-reliance and perseverance. If you're merely sitting around feeling sorry for yourself, you are missing the point entirely. The casual arrogance in her voice was stunning. Even now, she was attempting to frame my abandonment as a learning opportunity, one I ought to be grateful for. "Va, I've been learning plenty." "Va," I said. "Va, good. So, when do you want us to come get you?" "Dad thinks a week is enough to make the point." "Va, I don va you don va t va what?" "Va, I don va t want you to come get me." Another pause followed, longer this time. "What do you mean?" "Va, I mean I'm staying here for a while, maybe permanently." The explosion of protests that followed was predictable. I was being dramatic. I was missing the point. I was taking this too seriously. But beneath the protests, I heard something else: panic. This was not how their little psychological experiment was supposed to end. I hung up and turned off the phone once more. That night, sitting by the fire with a book and a glass of whiskey I'd bought in town, I realized something that should have worried me. I was no longer counting the days until I could go home. Instead, I was counting the days since I'd last felt this peaceful. By the end of my first week at the diner, I had become something of a local curiosity. Word travels fast in small towns, and everyone knew about the city fellow who had been abandoned at the old cabin and decided to stick around. What surprised them was how well I was adapting. The diner owner offered me additional shifts covering lunch. A local contractor mentioned he could use help with a cabin renovation project on weekends. The general store owner asked if I would be interested in handling their evening inventory once a week. Suddenly, I had more work opportunities than I had ever had back home. My phone remained off most of the time, but when I did check it, the messages had evolved from concern to frustration, then to outright anger. Her brother had left a voicemail. She called me childish. Her mother had sent a long text about family loyalty and forgiveness. Her father had escalated to threats, vowing to come up here himself and drag me back to reality. But it was my wife's messages that laid bare how profoundly they had misunderstood the situation. I know you've angry, and you have every right to be dash, one text read. But proving your point by sulking isnva, T going to fix anything. We can talk about this like adults when you come home. Sulking? So that was what she thought this was. After 10 days, I finally returned her call. Where have you been? She demanded immediately. Do you have any idea how worried we've been? I've been working to working? What are you talking about? I got a job at a local diner. I've also been helping with some construction work on weekends to The silence stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. You got a job? She repeated slowly. You've supposed to be learning a lesson about hardship, not starting a new career. Maybe I learned a different lesson than the one you intended to. This is ridiculous. Reacting like a child who ran away from home. Pack your things and come back. We can discuss this properly when you've rethinking clearly to. I am thinking clearly. Probably more clearly than I have in years. What that's supposed to mean? I looked out the cabin window at the mountains in the distance, painted gold by the setting sun. What means I like it here? The work is honest. The people are straightforward. And nobody plays psychological games for entertainment. We weren't playing games. We were trying to help you grow as a person by abandoning me in the wilderness as a joke it wasn't a joke. It was a learning experience. And clearly, it worked, since you've showing more independence than you ever did at home. The twisted logic was fascinating. Even my success was being reframed as proof that their cruelty had been justified. You've rewrite, I said. I am showing more independence, starting with the decision to stay. I have the independence to choose whether I wish to remain part of this family any longer. You don't mean that I hung up and turned the phone off once more. That weekend, I helped a contractor renovate a vacation cabin about 5 miles from where I was staying. The work was physical and demanding, yet satisfying in a way my old job had never been. At the end of each day, you could see exactly what you had accomplished. No abstract metrics, no political maneuvering, just walls that stood straighter and roofs that no longer leaked. The contractor, a weathered man in his 60s, worked alongside me with little conversation. On Sunday afternoon, as we finished the project, he finally spoke up. You're not bad at this. He said. But ever think about learning the trade properly? I might be interested. There's good money in it up here. Rich folks from the city keep buying mountain properties, and most of them need serious work. I've got more projects lined up than I can handle. He offered to teach me the skills I would need in exchange for labor on his current jobs. Within 6 months, he estimated I could be working independently. The pay would be better than what I had earned in my old corporate position, and the cost of living here was a fraction of what I had been spending in the city. That night, I called my wife one more time. Finally, she answered. I was starting to think you've lost your mind completely to. I wanted to let you know I am not coming back to. Stop being dramatic. Of course you coming back to. I am serious. I found work here. I am learning new skills. And I am happier than I've been in years. You've been gone for 2 weeks. That's not enough time to make life-changing decisions to. Your family made a life-changing decision for me when they drove away and left me here. I am just following through on the logical conclusion. The logical conclusion was supposed to be you realizing how good you had it at home and appreciating us more. Instead, I realized how much better life could be without people who think abandoning someone is an acceptable form of entertainment. Her voice rose to a near shout. We are your family. You can't just throw away years of marriage because of one mistake. One mistake, I replied. You spent 6 months planning this. You lied to me for half a year, convinced me to trust you, then abandoned me in the wilderness for fun. That's not a mistake, that's a pattern of behavior. We were trying to help you, she insisted. By humiliating me? By treating me like a lab rat in some twisted psychology experiment? By recording my reaction for your amusement? You're blowing this completely out of proportion. Am I? I asked. Let me ask you something. When you were planning this little adventure, did any of you consider that I might not find it funny? Did anyone suggest that maybe abandoning your son-in-law in the middle of nowhere might be cruel rather than helpful? Another long silence followed. We thought you'd be grateful eventually, she said quietly. Grateful for being abandoned, for being forced to discover your own strength. I discovered my own strength, all right, I told her, and I discovered that I'm strong enough to walk away from people who think cruelty is the same thing as love. I hung up for the final time. 3 days later, a truck pulled into the cabin's driveway. Through the window, I watched her father and brother climb out, both looking grim and determined. They had come to collect their wayward family member and restore the natural order of things. I stepped onto the porch to meet them and immediately noticed their surprise. In 3 weeks, I had lost weight, gained muscle definition from the physical work, and acquired what the locals called a mountain tan. I looked healthier and more confident than I had in years. You look different, her father said. Clearly not sure if that was good or bad. Clean living will do that. Her brother stepped forward aggressively. Enough games. Time to come home and face reality. I crossed my arms and did not move from the porch. This is my reality now. Reality. It is you who are living in a fantasy, one in which abandoning people is considered an acceptable family tradition. We came here to bring you back. Her father declared. One way or another. And how exactly do you plan to do that? They exchanged glances, realizing they had not thought this through. What were they going to do? Kidnap me? Drag me kicking and screaming to their car, like some rebellious teenager? You can't stay here forever, her brother said, though his voice lacked conviction. But why not? I have work. I have housing. I have a community that treats me with respect. What exactly am I supposed to be missing about my old life? Neither of them had an answer for that. Her father and brother stood in my driveway for 20 minutes, trying different approaches to convince me to leave. First came the guilt trip about family obligations, then practical concerns about my job and apartment back home. Finally, barely veiled threats about what would happen if I did not come to my senses. I listened patiently from the porch, arms crossed, letting them exhaust their arguments. When they finished, I offered them coffee. The gesture seemed to confuse them more than outright hostility would have. We've not here for coffee, her father said. We've here to bring you home. And I am here by choice, I replied. Interesting how that works. They left 20 minutes later, frustrated and empty-handed. I watched their truck disappear down the dirt road, knowing this was far from over. People like them do not accept defeat gracefully. I was right. Over the next week, my wife called repeatedly, cycling through every emotional manipulation technique in the book: tears, anger, bargaining, threats. She had apparently convinced herself that I was having some kind of mental breakdown and would eventually snap out of it. The breakthrough came when she mentioned therapy. I've been talking to someone about this situation, she said during one call. A professional who specializes in relationship trauma. It occurs to me you may be experiencing a form of Stockholm Syndrome, though in reverse. You have identified with your own isolation, rather than acknowledging that we are attempting to help you. You are in therapy because I found employment and achieved happiness. You are in therapy because you abandoned your family over a harmless prank. I abandoned my family. That is an interesting perspective, considering you are the ones who literally drove away and left me here. That was temporary. This is permanent. Do you not see the difference? I see the difference perfectly. You abandoned me expecting that I would fail and come crawling back. I did not fail. So now you're attempting to reframe my success as mental illness. The conversation concluded with her vowing to become more aggressive regarding intervention options. I interpreted this as a threat and determined it was time to formalize my position. The following morning, I rode the motorcycle to the county courthouse in a larger town approximately an hour away. There, I filed paperwork to establish legal residency, registered to vote, and open a local bank account. If they intended to escalate the situation, I would be prepared. I also visited a lawyer's office for a consultation concerning my legal rights. The attorney, a sharp woman in her 40s who specialized in family law, listened to my account with mounting astonishment. Well, let me understand this correctly, she said. Your wife's family lured you to an isolated location under false pretenses, then abandoned you there as a joke. And now they are threatening forced intervention because you chose to stay. That is accurate. And you have evidence of this? Recordings, messages, witnesses. I showed her the video her brother had taken of my initial reaction, which he had posted on social media, believing it was hilarious. I also provided screenshots of all their text messages and voicemails. This is actually actionable, she stated. What they did could constitute false imprisonment, abandonment, and potentially criminal conspiracy, depending on how you wish to proceed. While I had no desire to pursue criminal charges, I did seek legal safeguards against any attempts at forced intervention. My attorney drafted a cease and desist letter and assisted me in formally documenting that I was of sound mind and acting of my own free will. 2 weeks later, my wife arrived at the cabin unannounced with her entire family. This time, they had brought reinforcements, a social worker whom they had somehow persuaded to conduct a welfare check, and what appeared to be a private counselor. From the kitchen window, I watched as they emerged from 3 separate vehicles, clearly orchestrating a coordinated intervention. The social worker appeared uneasy, as if she had been misled regarding the purpose of this visit. I walked out to meet them, carrying the legal documents prepared by my attorney. Quite a delegation, I remarked calmly. The social worker stepped forward. Sir, I am here due to concerns about your welfare and mental state. Your family believes you may be in crisis. Do I look like I am in crisis? I replied. She studied me carefully. I was clean, healthy, evidently well-nourished, and entirely coherent. The cabin behind me was orderly and well-kept. The motorcycle in the driveway was clean and in working condition. Nothing in the scene suggested distress or incapacity. You look fine, she conceded. But your family is deeply concerned about the circumstances. Let me save everyone some time, I said, handing her the legal documents. I am here voluntarily. I am employed. I am mentally competent. And I have legal representation. This is not a wellness check, It is harassment. My wife stepped forward aggressively. You can't hide behind lawyers forever. This is our marriage we've re-talking about. Our marriage ended the moment you conspired with your family to abandon me in the wilderness, I replied. Everything since then has merely been paperwork. Her mother began to cry quietly. We only wanted to help you become more independent. Mission accomplished, I said dryly. I am independent. I no longer need any of you. The counselor they had brought along spoke for the first time. Sometimes people make rash decisions when they've hurt. Have you considered that this might be an overreaction to what was essentially a misunderstanding? A misunderstanding? I replied. Let me ask you something, doctor. If someone convinced you to go on a family trip, then drove away and left you stranded 300 miles from home as a joke, would you call that a misunderstanding? Well, when you put it that way, that is exactly what happened. I continued. They planned it for 6 months, lied to me repeatedly, then recorded my reaction for their entertainment. The only misunderstanding here is their assumption that Ivor D be desperate enough to forgive them. Her brother, who had been unusually quiet, finally exploded. This is insane. You've throwing away your entire life because you can't take a joke. I'm not throwing away my life. I said calmly. Ivor, am upgrading it. The job I have here pays better than my old one. The cost of living is lower. The people are honest, and nobody thinks psychological torture qualifies as family bonding. Ve being ridiculous. Am I? I countered. But let me tell you what is ridiculous. Driving 6 hours to harass someone who is obviously doing well. Bringing a social worker to investigate a man who is employed, healthy, and living independently. Refusing to accept that your little prank backfired spectacularly. The social worker was already walking back to her car. I am satisfied that this gentleman is acting voluntarily and is in no immediate danger. This isn't a matter for social services. The counselor followed her, clearly uncomfortable with being used as a prop in this family drama, which left me facing my wife and her family alone. This ends now, her father said, his voice low and threatening. You've made your point. Time to come home. Or what? Or we make things very difficult for you. I smiled. But you already tried that. How did it work out? For the first time since this whole thing started, I saw something in their expressions, and not anger, but the faint, unsettling flicker of doubt. In their eyes, there was no anger or frustration. It was the dawning realization that they held no power here. They had played their greatest card when they abandoned me, expecting it to break me. Instead, it had freed me. And now they stood in my driveway, on my property, begging me to return to a life I had discovered I did not want. The tables had turned completely. My wife broke first. But you want to know the truth? She screamed, her composure finally cracking. We did this because you were boring. You never took risks, never stood up for yourself, never showed any backbone. We thought maybe if we push you hard enough, you would finally grow a spine. The family fell silent. This was not part of their script. There it is. I said quietly. The real reason, but not character building, not helping me grow. You were embarrassed by me. Her father tried to salvage the situation. That is not what she meant. No, that is exactly what she meant. And you know what? She was right. I was boring. I was passive. I let people walk all over me because I thought that was what good husbands do. I stepped off the porch and moved closer to them. But here is what you did not count on. When you abandoned me here, you did not just test my survival skills. You showed me exactly what you really thought of me. And more importantly, you showed me what life feels like when I stop caring what you think. We were trying to help. Her mother protested. By humiliating me? By treating me like a failed science experiment? By recording my breakdown for your entertainment? You didn't break down. Her brother said accusingly, as though they were somehow cheating. Exactly. I did not break down. I built up. And that terrifies you, because it means your little psychological game backfired completely. I gestured toward the cabin, the motorcycle, the well-maintained property. You expected to find me broken, desperate, grateful to be rescued. Instead, you found me thriving, working, happy, independent in ways I never was when I was trying to please all of you. This is not true independence, her father argued. This is merely hiding from responsibility. What responsibility? My responsibility to tolerate being treated like garbage. My responsibility to pretend your cruelty was kindness. My responsibility to be grateful for being abandoned. My wife began to cry. But these were not the manipulative tears she had used on the phone. These were the tears of someone who realized they had lost something irrecoverable. I love you, she said desperately. We can work through this. People make mistakes. Some mistakes you can work through. Others reveal who people truly are. This was the second kind. So that is it. Years of marriage thrown away because of one bad decision. Not one bad decision, but 6 months of planning, deliberate deception, coordinated humiliation, and even now you are not apologizing for what you did. You are angry that it did not work. Her brother stepped forward aggressively. You think you are better than us now. I think I am better without you. There's a difference. You arrogant piece of a careful, I said, my voice dropping to a warning tone. You are on my property now. And unlike the old me, the new me does not tolerate disrespect. He backed down. Probably the first sensible thing he had done in weeks. You want to know what I learned out here? I continued. I learned that people will treat you exactly as badly as you allow them to. For years, I allowed all of you to treat me like your entertainment, your project, your pet. I thought that was normal family dynamics. I looked directly at my wife. Then you left me here, and I discovered what respect feels like. Real respect from people who earned it instead of demanding it. I'm not going back to being your family joke. We never thought of you as a joke, her mother said weakly. You literally abandoned me as a prank. You recorded it. You planned it for months. If that is not treating someone like a joke, what is? The silence stretched until her father played his final card. Vo, you will regret this. Vo, he declared. Vo, when the novelty fades and you comprehend all you have forsaken, you will come crawling back, and we may no longer care to welcome you. I smiled. Ve, you're likely correct about one thing. Years from now, I will probably look back upon this moment. Yet I will not dwell on what I relinquished. I will remember what I escaped. Without another word, they returned to their vehicles. As they drove away, I noticed my wife glancing back through the rear window, perhaps expecting me to chase after them, or at least to appear torn. Instead, I turned and walked into the cabin to begin preparing dinner. I had an early shift at the diner the next day and a construction project to finish over the weekend. For the first time in my adult life, I possessed a future that was entirely my own. 6 months later, I purchased the cabin. The family who owned it had tried for years to sell, but the remote location deterred most buyers. For me, the seclusion was the very appeal. I used the proceeds from selling my former house and car to buy it outright, no mortgage, no debt, no ties to my past. My construction business was thriving. Word had spread through the mountain communities about the city man who actually knew his trade and did not overcharge. I had contracts scheduled 3 months in advance, primarily with wealthy urbanites who had bought mountain retreats only to discover the properties needed substantial work. The irony did not escape me. I was earning more by helping others escape to the mountains than I ever had in my corporate career. My phone seldom rang anymore. I had changed my number, sharing the new one only with clients and local friends. Occasionally, an email from my former life would arrive, but these grew rare with time. Even my wife seemed to have moved on, though I heard through mutual acquaintances that she told people I had suffered a nervous breakdown. Let them believe that. It was simpler than the truth. I explained that their abandonment had been the greatest gift I ever received. When the diner owner retired, he offered to sell me the business. I gave the proposal serious thought before concluding that I valued the flexibility of construction work more. Still, I purchased the building and transformed it into a workshop for my tools and equipment. On the anniversary of the day I was abandoned, I hosted a party, not a bitter observance of divorce or revenge, but a sincere celebration of independence. The entire town came, bringing food, sharing stories, and offering genuine friendship. These people had accepted me without conditions, without tests, without elaborate psychological experiments. During the festivities, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. I heard you bought a place up there. I hope you will be happy. It was from her, likely hoping for some sign that I missed my old life or regretted my choices. I looked around at the gathering, at people who valued honesty over manipulation, hard work over image, substance over drama, and at the life I had built from the ground up, using skills I never knew I possessed. I typed in reply, then I deleted the number and turned off the phone. The party lasted until midnight, filled with laughter, stories, and the kind of authentic human connection I had forgotten was possible. After everyone had gone, I sat on my porch gazing up at stars you could never see in the city. Their cruel joke had been meant to break me, to prove I was weak and dependent. Instead, it uncovered a strength I did not know I had. They had tried to humiliate me into gratitude, but instead, they accidentally freed me from a life that was slowly suffocating me. The best part was not the success, nor the independence, nor even the peace. The best part was knowing I would never again allow someone to treat me as their entertainment. I had learned the difference between people who love you and people who love controlling you. 300 meters from where they had abandoned me, I had found something they never expected me to find. I had discovered myself at last. Unlike the twisted dynamics of their family, this version of me was here to stay. The joke, it turned out, had always been on them. They had cast aside someone who genuinely cared for their regard, someone who had striven for years to earn their respect. In return, they forged a person who no longer required their approval. I had become precisely what they professed to desire: independent, strong-willed, and unbreakable. The sole distinction was that now I embodied all these qualities apart from them. Our tale has reached its conclusion. If you have journeyed this far with me, consider subscribing to our channel. Your support aids us greatly. I have chosen 2 further videos that I trust you will find engaging. Please feel welcome to select them. I shall await you in the next narrative. Until then.